Welcome to Locked On Heat. In a second, I'll be joined by Matt George from Locked On Kings for a crossover episode to talk about potential trades between the Heat and Kings this offseason. We'll talk about Andrew Wiggins. We'll talk about DeMar DeRozan. A few other players get involved. And then I'll get the perspective of what it is the Kings might be looking for this offseason. A fun episode. It's coming up next.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now that Kevin Durant's been traded, it feels like the trade market is actually open for real. Durant was rumored to be on the list of the Miami Heat. He goes to the Houston Rockets. So now maybe the Miami Heat pivot their focus, and DeMar DeRozan is here in Sacramento waiting to be acquired. I say that not because the Kings are desperate to get rid of him, but I think both sides are ready for a change of scenery. I think the Kings want to move on. I think DeMar wants to move on. The Miami Heat make a lot of sense. So Matt George here from Locked On Kings, Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat. We're going to discuss what a DeMar DeRozan deal could potentially look like. Not just X's and O's of the players that will be swapped and what the Kings can get in return, although we will discuss that, but how much it makes sense for the Heat to go after DeMar. Wes, we'll start there. How hungry or how realistic did you feel a Kevin Durant trade to Miami was? And now that that's off the table, is DeMar DeRozan, in your mind, the next most achievable best option?
Well, I thought it was 50-50 with Durant. The reporting since the trade went down with Durant going to Houston is that Miami didn't want to offer all of their stuff. And that was pretty consistent with what we were hearing locally and what we've been talking about on the show. It's like they weren't going to offer Khalil Ware. They weren't going to offer, if it wasn't him, basically Phoenix was saying, if you're not going to offer Ware, then we want everything else. We want the picks. We want all the young players you have. We want everything. And Miami was like, nah, probably not going to give you that either. And, you know, Houston stopped short of offering their best stuff too. So it just turned out that Houston's worst package was better than Miami's worst package, and Kevin Durant ends up in Houston. But it's disappointing. It's disappointing if you're Miami because I think Kevin Durant made a lot of sense for the team. I understand that adding Durant to this roster didn't necessarily make them favorites in the Eastern Conference, but I also know that that's not how Miami operates. Miami doesn't say, hey, does this move make us favorites? No. They ask the question, does this move give us a chance? And then just by having Durant on the team, they figured that they might have had a chance. But they obviously didn't value him enough, again, to put all of their stuff into that package. So I don't know if disappointed is the right word for the Heat's front office. They're probably pretty content with how things played out. I would imagine maybe a little disappointed that Houston didn't settle for their, or that Phoenix didn't settle for their offer that they ended up giving them to Houston. But, you know, they obviously were prepared for life without Kevin Durant. And the good news is that the not trade for them happened so early in the offseason that they have maybe some other options to go to, which brings you to your question about DeMar DeRozan. And we know that the Heat kicked the tires on DeRozan last summer. DeRozan ends up in Sacramento. I think there's interest. I think there's been mutual interest between DeRozan and Miami. But it doesn't, if they weren't going to go all in for Kevin Durant, an aging scoring superstar, I can't imagine that they'd be willing to go all in for DeMar DeRozan either. It's probably just another player that they might kick the tires on again and see, what's this going to cost? Is it worth it? And if not, we're not going to push it too much and we're probably going to move along.
Yeah, obviously all in for Kevin Durant and all in for DeMar DeRozan are two very different things too.
Right.
And I'm not going to have, I'm going to ask a question that might get some tomatoes thrown at me or some people that roll their eyes at me, because I'm not saying that Durant and DeRozan are the same type of player. Durant is obviously, I mean, his accolades speak for himself. DeRozan is a Hall of Famer too, of course. But I wonder, like, from the Heat perspective, like if I'm trying to talk myself into a DeMar DeRozan deal from the Heat perspective, I wonder, even if Durant is the better player and definitely increases your title window or title chances more than DeMar DeRozan does, I wonder if the difference is significant enough to pay the difference in price, because the Phoenix Suns are not just trading Kevin Durant to start over, they're trading Kevin Durant to recoup assets for the treasure trove that they gave away for him. And in reality, they only got 1 first-round pick back. They got 5 second-round picks to make themselves feel better. Jalen Green's a good player. Dylan Brooks is a good player. The Kings, I don't think, are expecting nearly any sort of haul, and they're not looking to recoup assets for trading DeMar DeRozan. I think the Kings are just looking to find something that makes more sense for them. So that's where I feel a deal like this could actually be very, very realistic, because the Kings are not knocking on the door and asking for Khalil Ware or multiple first rounders for DeMar. It's more going to be something that I think gets them started on a new path, or at least gives them some sort of future outlook, which they just don't have right now with a roster filled with 30-year-olds.
Yeah, these are two teams that had to trade their star players in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
So they are in a bit of identity crisis, both of them. They're trying to figure out, okay, well, we don't have De'Aaron Fox anymore. We don't have Jimmy Butler anymore. Who are we? What does everything mean? What do we stand for? Like, that's kind of what both of these organizations are in the midst of trying to figure out. And so it would make sense that a roster, that Sacramento's roster doesn't all make sense. Miami's roster doesn't all make sense because the tentpole players are no longer there. The things that they were built around, Sacramento, half of what they were built around. Miami, very much, it's kind of similar to with Bam and Jimmy Butler, but nonetheless, 2 needle movers no longer there anymore. And I think that this summer, I think you hit the nail on the head. It just, okay, let's make a change here. Maybe it makes a little bit more sense with this new roster and kind of this new vision and this new direction that we're going into. So maybe it's like getting Durant from Miami would have been an improvement. Getting DeRozan, you could argue, might be closer to a lateral move, but sometimes lateral moves are just enough to shake things up, right? I always kind of use the analogy, it's a snow globe. You just kind of have to shake the snow globe and see if things fall in a different way that make a little bit more sense and make you a little bit happier.
Yeah, this would be a trade that strikes me as like the names make it a bigger deal than it actually is.
Right.
Like, because it's DeMar DeRozan and maybe Andrew Wiggins is traded back, right? Former number 1 overall pick. It's like the names are big, but the circumstances in reality are not. And I mean, I think DeMar DeRozan is still an extremely talented player. It did not work in Sacramento at all. But if you look at DeMar's numbers, he did exactly what he's done for his entire career. For some reason, Sacramento just thought it was going to change with him being there, that he was going to suddenly fit into what they were trying to do. Look, you can go back. You can find the tapes of me being excited about DeMar coming to Sacramento around a year ago. It didn't work. The Kings know that. DeMar knows that. DeMar's trying to win right now. I think if you're looking at the outlook of the Heat versus the outlook of the Kings, especially with the state of the Eastern Conference and all the unfortunate injuries to stars in the East, it's wide open over there. So I think it makes a whole heck of a lot more sense for DeMar to spend time in Miami. But that then kind of transfers us into the question, Wes, of what path are the Kings looking to take and which paths will the Heat play ball? I'm just going to throw out kind of 2 hypothetical pathways and we can get more specific on each one. There's the pretty much DeRozan for Wiggins, essentially quote unquote star swap pathway. Mm-hmm. And then there's the pathway of the Kings knocking on the door and going, hey, can we try and get the 20th overall pick in this year's draft? The Kings don't have a first round pick. Jaime Jaquez Jr., Terry Rozier, like these are the 2 pathways that I see the negotiations going. I don't know which one the Kings would prefer, to be honest with you. I know which one I prefer, but are the Heat willing to humor both those pathways, or would they only want to go down one?
I think they're willing to listen on everything at this point, right? I don't know how much they value their own 20th overall pick, not their own, Golden State's 20th pick, whatever. The pick that they have, the 20th pick. They have not, so as you know, the Miami Heat, very close-lipped organization. You're not going to get a whole lot out of them. But even despite that, we have gotten even less information on their workouts. And it's possible that Miami never expected to have the 20th pick, that maybe they thought that they were going to be trading it for Kevin Durant. So it's not to say that they're not prepared for this draft. Obviously, they would be. I don't know how much they're really valuing the 20th pick. And this is also a roster that needs something a little bit more than the 20th pick, right? You kind of think about the guys that they've taken over the last few years, whether it's Khalil Ware or Jaime Jaquez, Nikola Jovic, guys picked outside the lottery, right? They don't have that much use for, I mean, not to say that the 20th pick is useless or worthless, but they were kind of hoping for something a little bit more, whether it's Kevin Durant or something else. So to answer your question, Matt, I do think that they'd be willing to at least have a conversation about something that includes the 20th pick, because clearly they were willing to offer the 20th pick for Kevin Durant. So it's not like it's off limits. Durant, DeRozan, we've already discussed the difference, but it's not like it's off limits.
Yeah, the 20th overall pick too. The Kings are looking at it from a realistic standpoint, and we've heard rumors. Unlike the Miami Heat, there's a lot of information that gets leaked out of the Sacramento Kings organization, as the last couple of years have been very clear to that. But and we've heard rumors and speculation that the Kings are very confident that they will have a first round pick on draft night. The question is, though, are they looking to use that first round pick to trade for a young piece to start the Scott Perry era off here in Sacramento with an actual rookie? Or are they looking to acquire a pick to then flip that pick in another big deal elsewhere? So we don't know what route the Kings are trying to go. We're just trying to put the pieces together and make sense. That's why these two pathways are so interesting. A deal that I've heard rumored slash more discussed, like if the Kings would want to go in this direction, is essentially DeMar DeRozan and Devin Carter, who is the Kings' first round draft pick in last year's draft, for Jaquez Jr., Terry Rozier, and the 20th overall pick. No idea if this is real or if this is just smoke, but it is something that I have heard discussed. We've discussed here in Sacramento. It's made its way around Sacramento. Does that trade pique your interest? Do you think pique the interest of the Miami Heat? Like what are your surface level thoughts on a potential deal of that range?
Rozier, Jaquez, and 20 for DeRozan, right?
And Devin Carter.
For DeRozan and Carter.
Correct. I think Carter has to be thrown in there to make it, well, let's put it this way. I think Carter has to be thrown in there to make the Heat willing to give up 20.
Right.
Because I'm pretty sure Rozier and Jaquez Jr. for DeRozan just works financially. Maybe it might. Let's see.
You're about at the same money there, so that makes sense. I know that the Heat were high on Devin Carter in the draft process last summer, and there was a little bit of hope in that building that Devin Carter was going to fall to where they were. They ultimately, I think, were going to take a center, but they liked Devin Carter. This is interesting. They wouldn't blink twice at giving up Terry Rozier. Rozier was going to be part of the Durant trade had that happened. Expiring contract makes a lot of sense for Sacramento if you're trying to increase some flexibility going forward. Plays the point guard position, ostensibly something that Sacramento needs. I guess the real piece, though, going back for you would be Jaquez and 20. That would be the real value there. And Rozier is more of just like no frills, salary matching, don't have to worry about it 8 months from now, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if you're Miami, I think it's a fair trade. I really do. I think it makes sense. I think if you're Miami, you're getting DeRozan, you're getting Carter, you're getting two pieces you like, and you're sending out two pieces you like in Jaquez and 20. Like I know it doesn't usually work like that, but that's sort of like the rudimentary way that I think about things. Like how many pieces are you like getting back? How many pieces are going? As long as it's not a superstar trade. I don't know this would be their preferred route, and I don't know that they would necessarily do this, even though I might do it. Okay. Because Miami's problem here is going to be, well, we're giving up a draft pick and we're getting no draft capital back. So what they would probably be asking for is future draft capital coming back in order to help replenish it, because they're so short on draft assets right now that they really can't afford to get rid of them if you're not getting something back. I would argue, hey, Devin Carter is kind of as good as a draft asset. They would argue, well, we're giving up Jaime, who's kind of as good as draft asset, whatever. But it's interesting.
Yeah, I think the thought process in including Devin is we'll take the 20th pick this year for what was a lottery pick last year.
Yeah.
And basically kind of sell it that way. No idea. And that might be, some Kings fans might not like that because, like, are you giving up on Devin Carter? But you have to remember, too, Devin Carter was not the draft selection of new general manager Scott Perry. Mm-hmm. So to Scott, and I'm not saying Scott looks at things this way, but Scott might go, that's not my pick. I'm going to use it. Well,
can you tell me a little bit? I know he was dealing with an injury for the beginning of the season, but tell me a little bit about the Devin Carter experience in Sacramento.
Yeah, I mean, the intangibles are there. The things you don't have to teach are there in terms of the hustle, right? Like he's a hustle player. He is a really good rebounder for a guard. You see the wingspan, you see the impact on that. Jump shot looks broke. Like it just looks broken. It sometimes goes in. In fact, I was in Sacramento. Funny enough, his debut game was actually for the Stockton Kings, but the Stockton Kings played a G League game in the Golden One Center. They do it every year. And Devin Carter went crazy in that game. Knocked down a lot of threes. So the shot does go in. And towards the end of the NBA season, Carter was having more success and looking more comfortable. he went into a season without having a training camp and missed the first half of the season for a team with win now expectations, or at least playoff expectations, as a guard. So he was tremendously behind the 8 ball to begin with. Off the court, have heard some questions about attitude and diet and things of that nature. I don't know how significant that is to you or to anyone. I haven't heard it be like, man, this kid's terrible, this kid, like anything like that. But there have been certainly questions in that sense. I'm not tremendously excited about Devin Carter. I'm very intrigued of what Devin Carter looks like with an actual training camp. I never liked the Devin Carter pick to begin with because for where the Kings were at, I didn't think it made any sense. And turns out it didn't. So I'm kind of indifferent about Devin Carter. I'm not willing to just give up on the kid, but I completely understand if a new general manager wants to trade last year's selection that wasn't his for a pick that, even though that pick is worse, it's at least his pick and he can make his selection.
It makes a lot of sense, right? Jaime Jaquez, just for your fans, awesome rookie year, first team all rookie, dunk contest appearance.
He cooked the Kings.
Cooked the Kings. He was on the cover of GQ Mexico. Like it was a come up for Jaime Jaquez Jr. Sophomore season was not as good. Injuries derailed the beginning of his season. He had this weird stomach flu after the team played in Mexico. Little Montezuma's revenge, perhaps. I don't know, but it really screwed him up for a couple of weeks there, and then weirdly resurfaced later on in the season. So some questions about what was going on there in terms of just his health. It was a bad year. It was a bad second year for Jaquez. I don't think anybody expects that to be the Jaime going forward. It feels more like blip than trend. And, to repeat the cliche, development is not linear. The jump shot is a swing skill for him. It was really bad last year, but again, there was a lot of circumstances. And Miami's offense was a complete mess. It wasn't like they were imagine him on a team that just had a drive and kick option. Like Miami doesn't have a drive and kick offense. They don't have anybody that can do that. So if you put him in a better situation that could generate better looks, or even somebody like Sabonis in the post who can, kick out to split cuts, or guy in the opposite corner, or whatever, all the things that we know Sabonis can do, it makes a little bit more sense. I think those looks would be a little bit more cleaner for Jaime, but eats up space, tremendous cutter, awesome at finishing at the basket when he's healthy. Defensively, it's still a work in progress, but you like the signs that he's shown early, and the attitude, all the stuff that you preach, heat culture kind of stuff. All of that's there. Basketball IQ's off the charts, and a super underrated playmaker passer from that forward position too. And when he's getting downhill and eating up that space and putting pressure on the rim, it looks really good.
So let's take that deal and swap one thing out. Let's swap Terry Rozier out, add Andrew Wiggins in. Everything else is the same. The biggest difference is, one, Wiggins is not a point guard. Two, Wiggins has multiple years left on his deal. Rozier is an expiring contract. Now, whether the Kings would use that to their benefit or the Heat would, I don't know, because Wiggins is a better player and more impactful player than Terry Rozier would be. So how does that change things? Does that make things more appealing for Miami to get off of the Wiggins money, or less appealing because Wiggins is a better player?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends on when we're talking about this trade, right? Mm-hmm. If we're talking about doing this before draft night, then it's probably better for Miami to just include Rozier, get off that money, and have the better player with Wiggins still on the roster. But if we're getting later into the season, off season, and it's like, okay, Luka still hasn't signed his extension, and Jaren Jackson Jr. still hasn't signed an extension, maybe we kind of want this cap space in 2026. They might prefer to put Wiggins in the deal instead. Before we go further with that, though, let me just ask you a question, and I think it's an important one. What would stop Sacramento from just doing straight up Wiggins for DeRozan? No picks, no Devin Carters, no Jaime Jaquez. What do you think about just a Wiggins for DeRozan? Easy peasy, no frills. Wiggins goes to Sacramento, gives you a player that makes more sense on your roster, two-way player, doesn't need the ball all the time, all that stuff. DeRozan comes here, scores 23 points per game, plays in a bunch of games, innings eater for the regular season, and both teams walk away from it.
That was the other route that I think is a very, very strong possibility. If the Kings are looking for straight talent in return for DeRozan in terms of like the best player they could possibly get, I don't think they could do better. Genuinely. Like, and if that's the route they want to go, because what we understand, we know Kings ownership. So we're operating with the understanding of Kings ownership. They don't want to lose. They don't want to tank. They want to be competitive. Plus, they have 2 fat contracts in Zach LaVine and Domantas Sabonis here that they're probably not going to be able to move for the next year. So why not try and win, right? I think that's the mindset of the organization. But we don't know Scott Perry. He's new. So does he want to take those big contracts that he has, kind of live with it, and start to surround that with a Jaime Jaquez piece that is more like you can see it fits the long-term vision and it gives him something to look forward to 3-4 years down the line? Or does he just want to try and maximize talent now and try and maximize this window right now while he can? If that's the route he wants to go, I don't think there's anything there's better that you could do genuinely than Andrew Wiggins. And the money for Wiggins is not so horrible. I know it was bad when people were talking about it 2-3 years ago when he first. It's not that anymore because it's the tail end of the deal.
2 years, $28 million a year ish.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not terrible.
For me, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I would rather the Kings kind of go more of the retool route. But again, I'll just repeat myself. Like, if the Kings want talent, I don't know why they wouldn't make that deal. Like, if they want to go a talent to finally get a wing, maybe like give Keegan a little bit of help. And he's very familiar to Sacramento because of the battles with the Golden State Warriors. I think the Kings would absolutely consider that route.
If they needed the draft capital, because I don't think you would do Wiggins plus 20 for DeRozan. Wiggins plus 20 for DeRozan and Carter. Now we're getting into the salary issues, so then you kind of have to include Jaime or a piece like that.
Correct.
The thing that would put it over the top, I think, for Miami, if you're talking, because obviously Sacramento wants the 20th or a pick in the first round this year. For Miami, in terms of their draft needs, they're sort of landlocked with their Stepien rule stuff right now. And if they got a pick in 2027, a first round pick, it would unlock a bunch of other things that they could do in terms of trading picks and doing things like that. If Sacramento were willing to include the 2027 first, I know they have one coming over from San Antonio, and then they have their own first. And if they were willing to part with one of those picks, and we could talk about the accoutrements to the rest of the deal there, but if they were willing to part with one of those picks, especially right now before draft day, where, obviously that thing's going to hot potato away here, and then you lose the asset, the 20th pick I'm talking about here. If they could basically turn the 20th pick this year into something that they could use further down the line, that would be really interesting to Miami.
I think the only way the Kings would do it is it would be the Spurs pick. I don't think it would be their own, because the Kings know, just like the rest of the league knows, that a Kings draft pick is valuable.
Right.
Because the Kings typically aren't very good.
And frankly, I don't know that Miami cares which one it is.
Yeah.
I just think they want the thing, that pick in 2027 to unlock the picks around it.
I think this would cause the Kings to walk away.
Yeah.
Not because I just feel like I don't know how quickly the Kings would want to, specifically Scott Perry would want to use one of these assets. The best thing that Scott Perry's inheriting is at least they have their draft capital going forward. They didn't get much for De'Aaron Fox, but they have some stuff there plus their own picks. So if I'm Perry, I'm sitting on that knowing if I start building the way I like, then I can use these to kind of accelerate that process a little bit. So I think he'd probably rather do that than spend one right away to get Wiggins and Jaime Jaquez Jr. Now we're getting really into the weeds of the negotiation. I don't think this changes things too much, but I'll just ask you, because the Heat value draft picks and they don't have a lot of them, if the draft pick was taken off the table and it was Carter and DeRozan for Wiggins and Jaquez Jr., is that still a conversation? I mean, it's a compromise. The Kings are taking the pick off the table, but they're still getting Jaquez in the deal, which I think the Kings would really value a piece like Jaquez, not just because of who he is as a player, but the longevity. He's not a prospect necessarily, but he's a younger player that could fit in a longer timeline.
I think that's the conversation, right? And again, I know that they like Devin Carter. I don't know how much they like Devin Carter. And then you kind of get into the scouting part of what Miami thinks and how much they want to rearrange things. The other little kind of thing that you have to think about here from Miami's perspective also is that Davion Mitchell, restricted free agent this summer. If they feel like Davion's going to leave for whatever reason, that somebody's going to match something and offer him $15 million a year, some number that they're not willing to go up to, then maybe they say, you know what? It was real with Davion Mitchell. That was cool for half a year. But we can instead of that, maybe we get Devin Carter in here, who's similar type of player, defensive-minded guard, whatever. Maybe we bring him in. But if you have Davion Mitchell, do you want Davion Mitchell and Devin Carter? Maybe, right? I think that guards who can defend their position are very valuable in today's NBA. But so are wings like Jaime Jaquez Jr. And so then you kind of get into the thing, if you're Miami, you start to chart your offseason and say, do we need more of the wing? Do we need more of this guy? Carter is, he's one draft shorter than Jaquez. So then you start getting into, okay, well, where are we in our salary cap and the rookie scale contracts and extensions that we have to offer, whatever. But I think it's I don't think it would be a no. I just think it depends on the scout that they have on Devin Carter.
Well, I don't know about you, Wes. What I'm taking away from this conversation is like, this is a very realistic possibility. I think the question just will be which team is willing to compromise more first, whether it's the Kings, like we talked about, throwing in their own draft compensation, which I really don't think is going to happen, or the Heat being willing to budge on Jaime Jaquez Jr., or the Kings including Devin Carter, whatever the route may be. Right. I think this is a very, very, very realistic trade scenario that I would not be surprised at all if it happened this week, before or on draft night. But it doesn't have to happen on draft night. If the Kings, if 20 isn't in their sights, or they feel they can't get 20 from Miami, this is, of course, a trade that could happen down the line, too. So if this trade doesn't happen Wednesday night, that doesn't mean it's dead, doesn't mean it's over. I think it's very, very intriguing.
Or if they get a first-round pick from somebody else, and they say, well, we got the first-round pick from Oklahoma City, who knows what they're going to do with it. They have 2 first-round picks, so it's like, right?
Crazy.
And they literally don't have the roster spots. They have 15, and they have 24. Like, Brooklyn has 1 million first-round picks this year. Like, they have the entire first round, basically. So maybe Sacramento gets a pick somewhere else, and they say, well, we got the pick over here. Now let's do something that makes sense for the roster over here and whatever. Can I ask you about another player on the Kings, though?
Please.
Malik Monk.
Yes.
Awesome scorer. We know his shortcomings. Whatever. Good player. What's the price tag on a Malik Monk? Is he even somebody that's out there, shoppable, tradable, whatever?
100%. I mean, there's not a player on this Kings roster that's not available. And I think that's probably the fairest, most refreshing route or like mindset that a new general manager brings in. He's looking at this roster and going, none of this is mine. None of it works. So I'm going to look to maximize it. Here's the thing about trading Malik that I've tried to make Kings fans understand. It would hurt Kings fans because Malik is in many ways like the heart and soul of this team. He's the personality. Malik's contract is probably the most valuable trade piece they have, maybe outside of Keegan Murray. But if you're trading for Keegan Murray, you're also extending him in the very near future. He's going into the final year of his rookie scale deal. Malik is an $18 million per year player over the next handful of seasons. Like, he is a bargain for the value that he provides, whether it's as a 6-man or as a starter. I would expect the Heat and every team in the league to be calling about Malik, because the Kings, outside of, so the Malik, 18 million, then you have the DeMar, 24 million. Then you have nothing until the 40 million range with Sabonis and Levine. So, like, if you're going to trade contracts, like, Malik is the one that everybody's going to ask about. I think the Kings know what they have in Malik in terms of a valuable player. The question is now, though, how engaged Malik is going forward, because it seems like the experiment of him being a starter had kind of failed, and they're going to go back to him being a 6-man. Don't know how happy Malik is about that. Would Malik rather be a 6-man in a city like Miami for Heat culture? Probably, than Sacramento. That's not necessarily trending in the right direction. So yeah, I would say this. It's a roundabout answer way to say Malik 100% would be available in conversations. The Kings would try and play hard-nosed to get the absolute best that they could. The big difference that I see between like Malik negotiations and DeRozan negotiations, even though DeRozan is paid more, in DeRozan negotiations, the Kings are looking to get kind of the best that they can get with realistic expectations. I think in Malik conversations, the Kings would want to walk away feeling like there was an element of that package that they couldn't really refuse, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does. So what would it look like then? I mean, obviously the 20th pick now has to be part of this. That's for sure. And then some sort of salary match at the higher end where it's Duncan Robinson at 19.8, Rozier at 26 expiring. You've got the Wiggins contract in there. You've got Hero and Bam. They're not trading Bam or Hero for Malik Monk. So
sure.
It'd be one of, unless you start stacking like Kyle Anderson plus Haywood Highsmith, and then it gets kind of complicated. So what would be the piece that would have to come back, at least in terms of the salary matching?
Are we talking DeRozan and Malik, or just Malik?
Probably just Malik at this point.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense to me. I mean, the $18 million for Malik, I think the Kings would want Jaime to be in there, or would need Jaime to be in there. Duncan and Jaime probably would be the route, and then 20, I would guess, if that might be the starting point for the Kings, and then I don't know if the Kings would try and talk that down or have to include something else in that, but I would that's the route that makes sense. I don't think that Rozier would do anything for him. I know Wiggins wouldn't do anything for him in that deal financially. So I think it's probably Jaime and Duncan are the way they get the salary to work, and then you kind of pepper in the fillers around that. So that's where I think the conversation goes.
Duncan's contract is interesting too because it's 50% guaranteed by like July 6th or something. And you could increase the guarantee amount for salary match purposes if you wanted to, but you could pretty much get the deal done with Duncan's $10 million outgoing salary plus Jaime plus. I don't even think you necessarily need another piece in there.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You should be okay. And then you throw the 20th pick in there. So let's call it Duncan, Jaime, and 20 for Malik Monk.
I think the Kings would strongly consider that on draft night. Strongly consider it on draft night.
And then what if you did throw in Terry Rozier and DeMar DeRozan in that deal and just made it this big DeRozan and Monk for?
The Kings get their point guard that is an expiring contract, so he's off the books at the end of the year. I think the Kings probably would try to explore if they could get anything better for Malik elsewhere. But how long can you explore for, especially if you're trying to acquire a pick on draft night? I think the inclusion of Malik actually might take 20 off the table because I think the Kings would want more time to look elsewhere, if that makes sense. So I think a Malik Heat trade would be something that probably happens over the summer months beyond the draft. Like we're talking into July and early August, I think is when a trade like that would be discussed. But Malik, Heat fans understand Malik, just like anybody on this Kings roster, is on the table. Like if you're looking at the Kings roster and you want anything, it's available. The Kings aren't fire selling, but it's available. So
what's fun about Malik is that he played at Kentucky with Bam. So there's the obvious Kentucky connection there, which is, that's a thing. That'd be fun to talk about for a month.
Malik's a blast. I love covering Malik. He's hilarious. The energy that he brings to games, he's a fan favorite for a reason, right? He comes into the game off the bench and he'll throw lobs and put up crazy circus shots. Malik's fun, man. And he, in very many ways, was the lifeblood of the Kings teams over the last couple of years. So Malik would be a hard one for Kings fans to say goodbye to, but if we're realistic on the Kings trying to get back into a state of, I don't know, stability, Malik might have to go, right? Especially because you have a logjam of guards with Keon Ellis and Devin Carter and
Keon Ellis.
Right. Well, he ain't going anywhere. Plus his money is so low that you couldn't get anything of value for Keon right now either. So we'll see what the Kings do about him. Kings have a lot of questions to answer. I know so do the Heat. This was fun, Wes. I think we at least kicked the can down the road a little bit to see what this potentially would look like.
This is what it's like when two GMs get on the phone and talk, but podcast form.
But they're way smarter.
Way smarter and actually get to do things. We have the trade machine and get to screw around with contracts and the draft picks and stuff like that. No, this is good. I think this was really informative and really helpful and hopefully enlightening for Heat fans and Kings fans to kind of figure out where both teams stand.
Well, if this trade goes down, we'll have to get back together and break it down and what happens. I wouldn't be surprised by it, to be completely honest, but it's a route for both teams to take. Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat, Mac George from Locked On Kings. This is what you get on the Locked On Podcast Network. You get some hosts negotiating trades like we know what the heck we're doing. It's pretty fun.